our mortals. Welcome to the second episode of my TANAT podcast. So this episode is gonna be about a pretty interesting subject, and here I would like to discuss paganism. Paganism from which point of view? I want to discuss it not specifically in music, because usually I talk about music on my channel, but here on this podcast I would like to discuss religion and movement of paganism, pagan traditions, etc. Different aspects of it, my experience in it, etc., etc., etc. First of all, what do I think about paganism? Am I considering myself pagan? Paganism is a very wonderful thing. It's a very interesting topic for me to think about and to talk about. It's pretty interesting to research. The thing is that am I considering myself pagan? Well, the answer is yes. Yes, I am pagan. And the thing is that, how did I get into it? I got into it a few years ago. I remember I started studying it in school. Well, not as part of the lectures. No, I did it myself. It was my own intention. I remember I was so bored during the classes that when I've had access to the internet, I checked the internet. Started checking different information regarding the history of Russia, and while learning about different things like folklore, history of my home country, I stumbled upon different information about paganism. Since then, I started learning about it. Started getting more into the Slavic folklore. I started learning more about pagan traditions. Back then I was also very interested about runes. I was reading about runes a lot. I tried to learn the meaning of every rune in Futhark, and that's how my pagan way started. It was pretty interesting, but now now I realize that in the beginning my first steps in it were pretty naive, because I blindly believed all of the information that I've seen on the internet. Now when I learn more, I just realized that most of the information that I found there, especially about Slavic paganism, is just bullshit. I think this is very important thing, that many people who are interested to learn about paganism but don't know much about it. All people need to realize one thing, that literally 90% of the information regarding paganism that they will find on the internet is bullshit. It's made up thing. Maybe for some people it's hard to accept, especially for those people who read lots of different information on the internet and who believe at least most of that. It's hard for them to accept that most of the things they learned is a bitter, shameless lie. But it's true. It's true. Most of the information on the internet regarding paganism is written by the neo-pagans, about whom I will talk later in this podcast. Thing is that obviously with the coming of Christianity to Europe, many people were converted to Christianity. Well, most people. A lot of the information regarding pagan traditions and cultures was just destroyed. Especially it's terrible considering that pagans weren't really fans of writing. They didn't record much of their history. Mostly they shared information from generation to generation through the word of mouth. And a lot of pagans during the forced Christianization, many pagans were simply exterminated, especially in the Middle Ages. So that created a huge problem. It's especially a serious problem for Slavic people, because, for instance, Scandinavians, they wrote down information more often, and they usually did it on stones. The example, they wrote it on different things, but often they wrote the information on stones. But Slavs, they didn't have such privilege. Slavs, they've had lots of forests, they've had a lot of wood in their disposal. So the problem was that before the invention of paper, Slavs were writing on the wood. And as we all know, wood is rotting after some time. So a lot of the information about Slavic paganism is gone with no return. That's a huge problem. This problem that a lot of information about paganism was lost without possibility to revive it, it created a huge gap. And some groups of people, they take advantage of that gap. They try to falsify the information. They try to make it up for their own benefit. For example, to sell merch about paganism, like different books that have no historical value, books that will obviously tell to you nothing about paganism, or other kinds of merch like different necklaces, different kinds of jewelry, stuff like that. So obviously most of the stuff about paganism that you will find on the internet is bullshit. What is true about paganism, and when you learn about it, how to understand that what you're learning might be actually correct. On one hand, there are people who try to bring you the false information, and on the other hand, there are people who are on the opposite side. They're saying to you that, oh no, there is nothing known about paganism. We don't know anything about paganism, especially when it comes to discussing Slavic paganism. Like, oh, there is no information left. There is no point for you to research and study paganism, because all of the information is lost. Your connection with your ancestry, it was just broken. So you need to abandon going into paganism. Such kind of people are not good as well. So don't need to trust those people as well. What you need to understand about paganism is the fundamental stuff. Well, what is paganism and what it's about? First of all, paganism is based on the observations of nature, as many people already know. It's about embracing the nature, it's the religion of nature. All of the pagan gods, they represent some things that are happening in the nature, like there might be a god of thunder, god of fire, god of water. So this is what paganism is mostly about. And you need to understand, before learning about it, you need to understand this objective fundamental truth. What paganism clearly is not. First of all, in a modern time, many neo-pagan people, they try to mix up paganism with politics. Right-wing people, they try to connect it with neo-Nazism and leftist pagans. They try to connect it with things like, I don't know, New Age, different hippie liberal movements. Well, take the politics. When you learn about paganism, take the politics and throw it away right into the trash bin, because politics has nothing to do with that. It's the first thing. Second thing, what paganism clearly is not. It's not a rocket science. Many people recently, they overthink about paganism. They think that their ancient ancestors were some kind of superhumans who could fly, who could shoot lasers from their eyes, who had magic spaceships, etc. Again, take this and just like Michael Jordan, throw this information into the bin. Together with it, everyone who tries to say you such kind of information that your ancestors were superhumans during the pagan times. No, most of the time, pagan people, they lived in primitive tribes. They were common people who could not fly, who did not have spaceships, who did not shoot lasers from their eyes, etc. No, they were common folk who lived in the primitive villages and tribes, and it's not a problem, okay? So, for some people, it might be hard pill to swallow, but it's not a big deal. It's not a problem. All people had that historical period when they lived in the primitive tribes. And there is nothing to be ashamed about. It's absolutely normal thing. So just accept it. Just accept it. And paganism was not a rocket science. I've seen a lot of information where people say that paganism was very sophisticated. It was a very complex science-like religion, and pagan people, they've had a secret knowledge that is now lost. And back then, pagans, they knew all of the universal secrets. Well, of course, this is the lie. This is not true. Paganism actually appeared from the beginning because science was not developed in the ancient times. So paganism, it's not a sophisticated thing, and there is nothing bad about it, nothing to be ashamed of it. Just admit it. Paganism is not a rocket science. It's the religion of nature. And all gods are representing something from nature. And that's it. What else about paganism? What it clearly isn't. Many people are overthinking about paganism. I needed to touch that subject, what paganism actually is not. Because many people, they overthink it. They overthink that paganism is some kind of a very complex thing, but in reality it's not really complex. It's not hard to understand, and because a lot of information about paganism was lost after the Christianization, it doesn't mean that there is some kind of a secret universal knowledge that we lost and that our ancestors knew. No, not really. Especially, about overthinking paganism. I can mention such people like Varg Vikernes, who always tries to analyze all of the things from the pagan myths, from the pagan sagas and poems, like what it is about. That's a metaphor. This totally means this or that. Well, obviously, paganism is very metaphorical. And Varg is absolutely right about it. But I think that Varg kind of overthinks it. I have nothing against Varg, have nothing against what he does, like his music and his books, his role-playing games, etc. I don't mind about all of that, with all due respect, but I think he and people like him are overthinking paganism. This is the very important thing to understand. I think next thing that I would like to touch is that there is not just one single kind of paganism that exists. I honestly think that we better separate paganism into 3 different types, because all of those 3 different types, they appeared in a different time periods, and they have different concepts. They represent different things that are completely different and often have very little in common with each other. I would separate paganism into 3 types. Well, the first type of paganism is the one that appeared in the beginning. It's the most authentic version of paganism. I would even call it the authentic paganism. It appeared because people didn't have much knowledge about nature. Science was not yet developed. It was the Stone Age or the Bronze Age, so pre-antique periods. And in that time, people tried to explain different things that are happening in nature. For instance, if there is thunder, people often they had right to think that maybe someone does that. Okay, maybe there is a magic man on the sky who is angry, and in the moments when he is angry, he throws lightnings into the earth. So this is the kind of mysterious thinking, mysterious mindset that our very ancient ancestors had. There were many things for them that they could not explain, but they tried. It was the first type of paganism. The second type of paganism I would call the aesthetical paganism. It appeared with the classical antiquity, obviously. It was mostly in the ancient Greece and also the Roman Empire. And there, with the development of science and philosophy, people started understanding more that, okay, if it rains, it's unlikely that there might be a magic man who sends the rain. Many people started considering this idea more with the development of science and philosophy. So in the places like ancient Greece and the Roman Empire, pagan gods were more of personifications of things in nature and also different human traits, for instance, such traits as love, wisdom, intelligence, kindness, beauty, power, bravery, etc. So, in the classical antiquity, there were still different traditions and rituals, but people started understanding more about the world around them. So paganism turned more into something aesthetical. It turned into something aesthetical, and gods were more like personifications of different things around them. That's how it was. And for me, my favorite type of paganism is the second type of paganism, actually, the aesthetical paganism, and that's the type of pagan that I consider myself. And I will explain why a little bit later. Firstly, before that, I need to explain which one is the third type of paganism. The third type of paganism is a modern neo-paganism. The third type of paganism is more like New Age, hippie movement. Neo-pagans are people who try to role-play as pagans. The third type of paganism doesn't have much to do with the previous two. The pagans of the third type, they try to revive paganism of the first type, the way it was in the very, very beginning. But the thing is, because a lot of information they don't know, because that information is lost. They try to fill that void with some new made-up things that have nothing to do with the first nor second types of paganism. Neo-pagans, they try to create completely new stuff. So the kind of paganism that they created, the third type, well, the thing is that it doesn't have much to do with the original paganism. A lot of the stuff there is simply made up. It's fabricated. A simple example is the Slavic sign Kolovrat. Well, the round swastika, not with the 4 tips, but with 8 tips. Many people mistakenly think that Kolovrat is some kind of ancient Slavic pagan symbol. No, it's not. It was invented in the end of the 20th century. The thing is that Slavs, they never had Kolovrat. They never had that symbol. That symbol is just modern neo-pagan thing. It never existed before. And ancient Slavs never used that symbol. It's important to understand. So there are many things like that in the third type of paganism. What else about third type of paganism? Well, it's very much tied to politics. Just like I said earlier, left-wing pagans, they try to connect it to some liberal, hippie kind of stuff. And right-wing pagans, they try to connect it to neo-Nazism. This is another thing about the third type of paganism. So in conclusion, there are 3 types of paganism, just to don't confuse you. I will mention them again. First type, authentic paganism. Second type, aesthetical paganism. And the third type, neo-paganism. You don't need to confuse these 3 things. I think it's important to make this kind of categories, to don't be confused. And you must keep this information in mind while researching on paganism. It's not some kind of scientific thing about 3 types of paganism. It's just something that I realized for myself, and I would recommend this information to you because I think it might be very helpful for you during the research. So, which type of paganism is my favorite? Well, I already mentioned the second type, the aesthetical paganism, is my favorite, and I think is the only type of paganism which is worth embracing and reviving. I'm sure there will be some butthurt comments. What are you talking about? This is all bullshit, etc. Well, I don't care. Here is why I think that second type of paganism is the most relevant in the 21st century. Well, first of all, because authentic paganism, the way it was in the pre-antique times, the thing is that it's not always good and not always bad. In some cases, it was a very bad thing. For instance, in the Native America, where people did horrible, bloody rituals, like Aztecs and Maya people, they did a horrible, bloody rituals. They practiced cannibalism and stuff like that. So sometimes it was bad, but sometimes it was good. The first type of paganism, it's not always good, but at the same time, not always bad. Just the product of its time. You need to realize this fact. For some people, it might be a hard pill to swallow, but you need to realize this obvious fact that the authentic paganism, the first type, it was the product of its time. Back then, science was not developed. People did not understand how to explain different things in nature. So they tried to explain it with the mysterious mindset that they've had back then. But later, with the aesthetical paganism, pagan religion, traditions, pagan gods, it all became more poetic. It became more metaphorical, more artistic. The paganism, the way it was in the ancient Rome and the way it was in the ancient Greece, I'm not saying that you should worship specifically ancient Greek or ancient Roman pagan gods, okay? Different pagan gods in different regions of Europe, they're pretty much the same. They have same origin. Pagan gods, Scandinavian gods, Slavic gods, they're pretty much similar. What I'm trying to say is the concept of paganism and the perception of it. And it's much better to perceive it more aesthetically. That pagan gods, they are more of poetic metaphors for different things in nature and for different human traits like love, strength, intelligence, wisdom, beauty, etc. This is the relevant way. This way, but the thing is that the way it was in the ancient times, in the pre-antique times, that thing is already irrelevant. Because we all know that when it rains, it's not some magic guy who is sending rain on the planet Earth, okay? We all know that. Stop trying to deny it. So you need to stop being in denial. You need to stop overthinking about paganism. You need to embrace paganism for what it is, no matter how unpleasant the truth might be. Second type of paganism is the best, in my opinion. You can disagree with me, fine, but in my opinion, it's the best type. And it's the one which is worth embracing and reviving. My point of view. For example, I'm pagan, but of course I will not go to the forest and cut the chicken to provoke the rain. For me, for instance, the best way to hail the great pagan gods is just to, for instance, to go to a museum and take a look at the paintings, take a look at the Renaissance paintings or with the pagan aesthetics. I can walk around the streets, for instance, and I can see great sculptures with the great pagan gods. I can look at it. I can look at it. I can admire the beauty of that sculpture. I can admire the aesthetics of that sculpture. I can admire the person who made it. And for me personally, it's the best way to hail the pagan gods by looking at art, like sculptures, music. I can listen to Wagner, right? I can listen to Wagner, and for me, it's an amazing way to hail the great pagan gods. Like listening to music, looking at sculpture, paintings, looking at the architecture, etc. is the best way, of course. And obviously why I don't like the third type of paganism, because it is very hard even to call it a reconstruction. It is based on lies. I think one more thing to understand about paganism that I almost forgot to mention is, how do you properly research on paganism? Well, this thing is pretty interesting because, as I told you already, that most of the information, 90% of the information that you will find on the internet is a lie. Then how else do you do it? It's pretty simple. First of all, you need to understand the fundamental concept of paganism. You can take a look at the history of your country, history of your people, or maybe other countries. You can take a look at art. You can take a look at the folklore. You can take a look at the different superstitions that exist in your country for centuries. Even the very small superstitions, they all came from pagan times. It's all came from paganism. People just forgot about it, mostly. Different superstitions, different traditions, different folk tales, even folk tales like fairy tales for children. All of that stuff has pagan roots. Just take a look around. Even the small things. For instance, when people are going to a funeral, they often put different objects on the grave of the deceased, like food, maybe toys, maybe, alcohol and cigarettes, maybe other things that were very pleasant to the deceased when he was alive, maybe different jewelry, flowers. All of that is pagan. Christianity did not allow such kind of things. They did not allow putting different objects like flowers and food on the grave of the deceased. They did not allow such things. These things, they came from pagan times. So that's how you do it. Learn about history of your country. Learn about folklore, about different folk tales, myths, superstitions, even children fairy tales. You'll find plenty of information from it. Next thing, after you learn more about it, you need to realize one thing, that folklore is not everything. This is the huge problem from many modern neo-pagans. Another problem, they try to stick to the folk. They try to stick to the folklore. But you need to realize that that folklore is not everything. Well, the thing is that you need to go further. Learn about art, about Renaissance, for example. Because Renaissance is the revival of the antique pagan traditions. It's the attempt to revive paganism of the type 2 that I mentioned before, the aesthetical paganism. If you want to learn about paganism, you need to learn about it not only from the folklore point of view, but also from the aesthetical and atmospheric point of view, because it's necessary during your research. When you try to find different information on the internet, pay close attention to the sources. Why is it important? Because often all of the articles that are about paganism, especially those that are lie, they don't have any links on the sources. So people who write neo-pagan articles that have nothing to do with actual paganism, what they do, they write made up bullshit that they take from their head, and they don't leave any sources because they don't have any. They did not check out any archives. They did not do in-depth research. They did not check out anyone else's research. So when you read a neo-pagan article, you will notice that there will be no sources at all. You need to understand this thing. So don't trust the article that has no sources, because usually it's a made-up falsification. Okay, this is all that I wanted to say. Have a good day. If you enjoyed this podcast, press like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel to help it grow, buy my music on Bandcamp to support my channel. All links are in the description below. Farewell, stay out of hell.